Ahmed Abu Aziz. Mohammed Salama. Muaz Abu Taha.
Her voice for justice is loud and clear. Today she will be speaking about war crimes of the killing of 250 plus Palestinian journalists, and she will introduce us to another very special photojournalist that served in Gaza. Let's give a warm welcome to Reka Basu.
So I want to first introduce my friend Ted Naders, and he's a photojournalist. He has spent years doing photojournalism in Gaza, and he still knows many journalists there, and he's in touch with them daily. So he can speak, I think, more after I'm done talking a little bit about what they're experiencing every day and how difficult it is to do this job under these circumstances, but also to the depth of their commitment to getting the message out. Journalists tell tough truths. We report on the illegal actions of politicians and other violations of public trust by revered leaders. We report on environmental pollution generated by big ag that harms wildlife and public health, but is tolerated because the CEOs are campaign donors. And we are eyewitness to human rights violations, war crimes, and genocidal campaigns that would otherwise go untold. That's why journalists themselves can become targets when they tell stories that could awaken people and generate protests that could help undermine a regime's grip on power. That's happening here in the US, where the president wages an unprecedented campaign of lawsuits against the free press to silence it. And it's happening in Israel, which began with barring foreign media from entering and reporting on the slaughter of Palestinians and the devastation of their homelands, and has advanced to killing the local journalists who cover it. Fearing world opinion could turn against it and cost it massive unconditional US funding, Israel decided to target the messengers for reporting what they're witnessing. As of August, the total of journalists killed was around 250, though that number has risen, I'm sure. A Brown University study back in April found that more journalists have been killed in Gaza since the 2023 Hamas attack than in the US Civil War, 2 world wars, the Korean and Vietnam War, and the wars in Yugoslavia and Afghanistan combined. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, Israel is engaging in the deadliest and most deliberate effort to kill and silence journalists that it has ever documented. One of those people killed, who I wrote about, was Mariam Abu Daga, a 33-year-old mother and freelance journalist in Gaza who kept working knowing she likely wouldn't survive. She had also written a letter to her 13-year-old son to be read after her passing. A video aired from the rooftop in Khan Yunis, where it happened, showed journalists raising their hands to identify themselves after a first bomb went off. But that didn't stop the second bomb from killing 5 journalists, some with Al Jazeera and others working freelance. Daga, like every other working journalist in Gaza, had refused to be intimidated into stopping. She was determined to record the nearly 2 years of destruction, loss of life, and what the World Health Organization calls man-made mass starvation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the hospital casualties a tragic mishap. But the Committee to Protect Journalists calls these lethal attacks deliberate. According to the Associated Press, Daga's work captured families displaced from homes, people crowding around aid trucks, mourners attending funerals, and doctors treating wounded or malnourished children. She worked, quote, under incredibly difficult circumstances to bring stories from Gaza to the world. The AP's executive editor said in a story, particularly the coverage of the war's impact on children. The US president, who has repeatedly spoken of clearing out Gaza to turn it into a French Riviera, has also given Israel ceasefire deadlines which have been ignored. But the one thing that could work, massive US economic sanctions, hasn't been used. We need to hold the American president accountable and demand...
Mic went off.
Mike, Jeffrey. I mean, maybe I bit it too hard. Sorry.
I didn't really had wings.
Maybe that was Netanyahu interfering. We need to hold Donald Trump accountable and demand that our country not give one more dollar to a country that is eviscerating a people and their homeland and those who bear witness to it. Silence is complicity, and we can no longer be complicit to this genocide of truth tellers and everyone else who can't stand up for themselves.
A community that relies upon you to tell your story to the world. The journalists in Gaza, like everybody else, have been suffering the genocide on a daily basis. Whether it's collecting food, housing their family, or getting water to bathe with. They haven't had an easier time than anyone else.
They got my phone.
This summer I worked on a film in Gaza with a friend of mine who's a filmmaker there. And probably the most astounding part of all of this was when we would communicate every day, when he would upload his footage, and when we would talk, it was like he was working anywhere else. It wasn't as if he was going through a genocide. He just got up every day and worked, despite the fact that he had to care for his family, his 3 kids. He lost his home. They are a group of people, all of the Gazans, that have been dehumanized so much that nobody cares or nobody wants to believe that they're actually humans. And this goes for the journalists. It's been a failure by the Western media, where they still dehumanize and question whether or not Palestinian journalists are equal to them, whether or not they can be targets. And the Israelis have taken advantage of this. When they killed Anas al-Sharif, it was because they wanted everybody that was a journalist in Gaza to know that they will kill you. So everybody, the thing about the journalists in Gaza that nobody wants to talk about isn't just how they've been slaughtered. It's that they've been forced into this situation of war reporting. Many of the journalists that I know in Gaza, they don't want nothing to do with photographing war. Even the ones that have won Pulitzers like Muhammad Jidallah, Yasser Qadhi, they just want to photograph regular stuff. If there's one thing the people in Gaza want, it's for people not to stop talking about Gaza and to continue to spread their word. And the journalists of Gaza are still putting out incredible work, and they're still being dehumanized by the Western media who question whether or not what they're doing is equal to them. So please, don't stop talking about Gaza.
To make a brief statement on behalf of Catholic Peace Ministry. This is day 762 of an unrelenting assault on the Palestinian people. Journalists in the West Bank and Gaza have been blocked, threatened, assaulted, arrested, tortured, detained, abducted, assassinated. the serial killing of journalists, and for that matter, the serial killing of doctors and nurses, and the targeting of their families are all war crimes. When I was at Iowa State, my undergraduate degree was in journalism, and back when we had something called journalism in the United States, but one of my first classes, in fact, I was taught that journalists are non-combatants, that they are civilians, that they have special protections under international law. The New York Times, National Public Radio, PBS, Fox News, CNN, I could go on and on, are not only cowardice, but they are also complicit in these crimes. And I will also say the same thing for the journalism departments all across the United States of America for their silence, and also the silence of so many professors. Although there's a lot of exceptions to that. There's a lot of professors that were outspoken and were active in a lot of Ivy League schools, etc. Now, I don't expect a lot from what Mark Twain described as the true criminal class, the United States Congress, but we still have to call upon Zach Nunn, Charles Grassley, and Joni Ernst to have a conscience and to stop all U.S. military aid to the State of Israel. I will also say that the double tap bombing that killed Miriam, the journalist who Reka spoke about, is also something that our own military practices, if we're honest about it. So let's not forget that on November 13th, 2001, we bombed the Al Jazeera facilities at Kabul. And on April 8th, 2003, we bombed the Al Jazeera facilities in Baghdad and killed Tariq, who was an Al Jazeera journalist. Amira Haas was a courageous journalist who some of us had a chance to meet when she came to Iowa City. And even though she was Israeli, she reported from Gaza for much of her life, and it was actually published in Haaretz. And she said that the job of journalists is to monitor the halls of power. So in fact, it's not surprising that authoritarian leaders like the current regime in the United States and the current regime in Israel try to silence those individuals, because they are in fact like a fourth branch of government.
Hussam Al-Masri, Miriam Abu Daga, Anas Al-Sharif, Mohammed Nufal, Ibrahim Zahir, Mohammed Kreka,